Good morning, everybody. I'm going to be walking through the Chapter 7 practice exam for you. Here's the cover page. Basically, if you do this practice exam, you're going to find great success on the Chapter 7 assessment. It looks just like this. There are going to be 4 sets of problems. One of them is always a bonus. So let's get started. So on the very first page, you're going to notice that in problem number 1, you are being asked to factor each of the polynomials. Again, you are looking to factor. So when I tell you, or when the directions tell you to factor, what you're looking for are 2 sets of parentheses, and you need to make sure that you show all of your detailed work. Some of the work can be done in your head. I understand that. So as long as you show the work on the other problems, that'll be great. The other thing I need to remind you is you always want to make sure that you're looking for a GCF and you're looking for patterns. So let's get started. A, s squared minus 100. The very first thing I'm going to notice is I've got a perfect square of s squared and another perfect square of 100, and I am taking the difference. Therefore, I also notice that there is no middle term. There is no bx, which means it is a 0bx. So how do I get to a 0bx? I have a plus minus situation. So I'm going to take the 2 letters that make up the s squared of the perfect square, which is s, and I know s times s is s squared, and my plus minus, I know it's going to be plus minus because I have a 0 middle term, and now I'm looking for the 2 numbers that make up the perfect square of 100, and that is plus 10 and minus 10. So those are my 2 factors, s plus 10, s minus 10. Moving on to letter B, you're going to notice that, again, I've got a squared minus 15a plus 50. Very first thing I'm noticing is my coefficient on the a is a 1, which makes factoring really nice and easy. So now I'm basically looking for factors of 50 that are going to add to negative 15. So you've learned in class to make an x, or you can simply write the factors. So I'll go ahead and use the X box, and then I'll also show you using factors. So we know that I'm looking for 2 factors that multiply to 50. Well, what are they? 1 times 50, 2 times 25, 5 times 10. And I'm going to stop right there because when I look at 5 and 10, I know that if I add those 2 together, I can get to 15. But now I've got a question. I've got positive 50. I need to get to negative 15. So basically, what do I need to do? I have 2 negative numbers, because negative times a negative is a positive number. And when I add those 2 together, I get negative 15. So what I'm going to do is I know I've got 2 factors. Again, I know that my very first set of factors is a times a. And now I'm going to take my 2 numbers right here. The only reason why I don't have to draw a box is because my coefficient is a 1 on the a. So I'm basically going to just pull those 2 factors, minus 5 and 9, minus 10. So I'm going to go ahead and double check my work to make sure I agree. A times a is a squared. A times negative 10 is negative 10a. So I'm just distributing. Negative 5 times a is negative 5a, and negative times negative is plus 50. I'm going to combine like terms, and I get a squared minus 50a plus 50. Do I agree? Absolutely. Therefore, these are my 2 factors, a minus 5 and a minus 10. Moving on to C, one of the things I noticed is that I've got a coefficient of 3, which means I can't use this simplistic methodology to factor. I can grunt it out and do a guess and check, but in class we also learned that we could do a box diamond. We've also learned how to factor by grouping. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the X, or the box and diamond method. So getting started, I'm looking at my first numbers in front of each of my variables. I've got a 3 and a 16, and I've got negative 12. So I'm looking, do I have a GCF? The answer is no. There's no GCF. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply A times C. And when I multiply A times C, I get negative 36. So now I know at the top of my X is negative 36. And I know that what do I need to do after I multiply? Well, I need to take my middle term of positive 16. So now I'm looking for two numbers that are going to multiply to negative 36 but give me a positive 16 when I add them. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to list my factors. I know I've got 1 times 36. I know I've got 2 times 18. I know I've got 3 times 12. I've got 9 times 4 and 6 times 6. So I'm taking a look and I'm looking for a sum of 16. Well, that doesn't work, that doesn't work, that doesn't work. Oh, I've got 2 and 18. If I add those two together, I get 20, but when I subtract them, I get 16. So that's what I'm going to use. How do I know I need to use those? Well, because I'm looking for a sum of 16, but now I've got this negative 36 situation. So what do? I know that my first number, or my bigger number, has got to be positive. So I'm going to use 18, and I'm going to use negative 2. So now what I'm going to show you is I've got 18 and negative 2. So that means when I draw my box, I always put my squared term down there. So I'm going to use 3t squared. I know I always put my last term in the box in the back at the diagonal. So then what I need to do now is I need to figure out, I need to place my other two numbers inside the box. So I'm going to use 18 and negative 2. So now I need to figure out what goes on the outside. Well, I know that 3t times what will give me t squared? Times t. 3t times what will give me, these got to be t's because those are my middle terms. 3t times what gives me 18t? 6. Okay, so now I'm going to go over here and I'm going to go 6 times what number gives me negative 12, or what number times t gives me negative 2? It doesn't matter which way I go. I know it's minus 2. So now here are my factors, my base and my height. So my first factor is 3t minus 2, times t plus 6. Those are my factors. And I can double check my math by going 3t times t is 3t squared. 3t times 6 is 18t, minus 2t is plus 16t, and then I go minus 12 at the end. So that's doing the box and the X. I'm going to show you, because I do have some students that are using grouping, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to show you that method as well. And I'm going to change color on my pen. And if you want to skip over, you could stop this and fast forward to D, but I'm going to go ahead and do by grouping. So what I'm going to do is I am going to look at my two factors right here, which is 2 and 18, and I'm basically going to take my 3t squared. I'm going to write that down, so I'm going to take my first term, and then I'm going to use plus 18t. Now I'm going to take my second, and I'm going to go minus 2t, and I'm going to pull up my last term of minus 12. So if you look at my middle terms, if I take 18t minus 2t, what do I get? I get 16t. So now I'm going to underline each one of these binomials, and I'm going to notice that I can factor something out of these two. I can factor out a 3t. So when I factor out a 3t, what am I left with? I'm left with t plus 6. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do the exact same thing. So I'm going to take a look. What's common between 2t and minus 12? I can pull out a 2. What am I left with when I do that? Well, 2 divided by 2t is t. And when I pull this out, I need to get to negative, so I know that this has got to be plus 6. So now take a look. What's common? T plus 6. So therefore, I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to take this factor of t plus 6, and now these two numbers make up my other factors. So I'm going to go 3t minus 2 times t plus 6. I ended up, take a look, these are the exact same thing. I've just done it in 2 different ways. All right, moving on to D. Got 9x cubed minus 9x. Well, the very first thing I'm going to notice is I've got a common GCF of 9x for sure, but I'm going to notice something more. Can I pull anything else more out? No, just 9x. So I'm going to pull out a 9x. That's my GCF. And when I do that, what am I left with inside? I'm left with x squared minus 1. So the next thing that I do is I look and I see it. I go, wow, look at that. I've got a perfect square inside, and I'm taking the difference of them. So what do I mean by that? I know that x squared is a perfect square because x times x is x squared, and I know that 1 is a perfect square because 1 times 1 is 1. So I can write these as factors. 9x times x plus 1, x minus 1. And I'm good to go. So again, noticing the pattern of a perfect square right here, difference of 2 squares allows me to quickly factor to x plus 1, x minus 1, and I did indeed pull out my GCF of 9x, and you need to remember that GCF stays in front of your factors. Okay, moving on to the next, letter E. I've got 2b cubed plus 18b squared minus 72b. So I'm going to notice that what? I'm looking for b's. Ooh, I can pull out a b, and a b for sure. What else do I notice? I can pull out a 2. So my GCF is going to be 2b. So that means I'm going to factor out a 2b from each term. So when I do that, factoring out a 2b from each term leaves me with b squared plus 9b minus 36. So now I'm going to take a look and I'm going to go, wow, look at that. So I've got a 1 in front of my b squared. I'm going to notice that 36, and I need to get to 9 in the middle. So what I'm going to do is I'm looking for factors of 36 that are going to add to 9b, but when I multiply gives me negative 36. So let's go. Let's see, we know 6 times 6, and I need to get to 9 over here, right? I know that 6 and 6 doesn't equal 9, so that doesn't work. 1 and 36? No, that doesn't work because I've got to get to 9. 9 and 4? Well, I know 9 and 4 is 13 if I add them, and if I subtract them, I get 5. Well, that doesn't work. Again, I need to get to 9. So let's see, 12 times 3. Well, if I add those two together, I get 15, but when I subtract them, 12 minus 3, definitely 9. So those are the 2 factors I'm going to use. And what's nice about this is that this is a coefficient of 1, so I don't have to worry about drawing a box. I can simply take my 2 factors right there. So my final factorization is b plus 12 times b minus 3. And I've gone ahead and I've factored my polynomial of 2b cubed plus 18b squared minus 72b. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do f, letter f, and you're going to notice that I've got 16s squared minus 1. The very first thing that you should notice is 16 is a perfect square, s squared is a perfect square, and 1 is a perfect square, which makes my factoring really easy. So I know that I'm going to have a plus minus situation, and now I'm simply looking for the numbers that when I multiply together give me 16 that are perfect squares, s squared and 1. So 4s plus 1, 4s minus 1. And I'm good to go. Okay, so now let's look at the next page. So the very first thing that you need to notice, and I'm really going to stress this, and I hope nobody makes this boo-boo on the read test, is read your directions. What do your directions say to solve? The other thing you need to note, look at it's set equal to 0. So, and notice, show all of your detailed work. I know I have a lot of you that want to do it in your head, but I need to actually see your beautiful work. So, the very first thing that I'm going to notice for for letter A is I've got two factors and they're set equal to 0. So using the zero product property tells me that one or the other of these factors could be 0. So I need to set both of them equal to 0. And then all I need to do is now solve. So I'm going to, that's a z. I don't know where I got the s. That's a z. So I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides, which means I've got z is equal to negative 3, or I'm going to add 7 to both sides, which means that z can also be positive 7. So what does that mean? It means I've got two answers for z. Z could either be negative 3 to make this side 0, and 0 times this is going to give me 0, or z can be 7, because 7 minus 7 is 0, and anything times 0 is 0. So I do indeed have two solutions, and it can be either or. If you forget to write the word or, it is not the end of the world, so please do not worry about it. So now let's look at B. So in looking at B, you're going to see I have three factors. I have 2y, y minus 9, and y plus 4. Each one of those factors needs to be set equal to 0. So I'm going to go 2y is equal to 0, y minus 9 is equal to 0, and y plus 4 is equal to 0. So continuing to solve, I'm basically going to divide both sides by 2. Therefore y is equal to 0. I'm going to add 9 to both sides on this equation, which leaves me with y is equal to 9. And then on this equation, I'm going to take 4 away from both sides, which leaves me with that y could also be negative 4. So again, I have three solutions for y. All three of them, when inputted into the equation, will make a 0 as a factor. Therefore, either any of these three solutions will work. Moving on to C, you're going to notice that I have b plus 13 squared. So what does that square mean, or that exponent of 2? It means that I've got b plus 13 times b plus 13, and that's equal to 0. Therefore, I know that they're the same factor, so I'm going to set one of those factors equal to 0, which means I'm going to subtract 13 from both sides, meaning that b can be equal to negative 13. So that is my solution. Moving on to D, I have 15. I've got three factors. Take a look. Three factors. What are my factors? 15 minus 5c, 5c plus 5, and negative c plus 6. They're all equal to 0. So basically, I am going to be solving each one of these to 0. So 15 minus 5c is equal to 0. 5c plus 5 is equal to 0. And negative c plus 6 is equal to 0. I'm going to go through all of the steps necessary to be able to solve for c. Therefore, I know that c can be 3. I know that c can be negative 1. Or I know that c can be equal to 6. So, or negative 6. Yeah, it should be 6 because then I'm going to take the opposite. So 6 plus 6 is 0. All right, so again, 3 solutions for C. Okay, moving on to letter E, you're going to notice that I have got now a polynomial, a trinomial, and I know that it's equal to 0. So I can't solve it looking like this. How have we solved every single problem up here? They need to be in factored form. So that means I need to factor this polynomial and make it equal to 0. So I'm going to notice I've got a coefficient of 1 in front of the x squared, which makes my life really easy. So therefore, I'm going to look for factors of 18 that when I add them together give me negative 9. So what am I going to do? List the factors of 18. So I'm going to go 18 times 1. I know 9 times 2. I know 6 times 3. And that's about it for the factors. So I'm now looking for negative 9. 18 and 1, I know that that doesn't work. 9 and 2, if I add those two together, I get 11. If I subtract them, I get 7. That doesn't work. 6 and 3, oh, bingo. That gives me 9. But I need to get to negative 9. I need to get to negative 9 and I need to get to positive 18. Therefore, I know that each factor needs to have a negative in it. So my two factors are x minus 6 and x minus 3. Notice I didn't need to draw a box. Why? Because my coefficient is 1. I can simply take my two factors right here. So now, I'm not done. Why am I not done? Because it told me at the beginning to solve. So I've got it equal to 0. In order for me to solve, I'm going to take each factor, x minus 6, set that equal to 0, and now I'm going to put x minus 3 is equal to 0, and I'm going to continue to solve. Solving for x gives me that x is equal to 6, or that x is equal to 3. Because either one will make one of my factors. So you can put or. Again, if you don't write or, it's okay. Moving on to do the last one on this page, we have d squared plus 11d minus 26. So again, I'm solving, and it's set equal to 0. I'm going to notice that I've got a polynomial. It is not in factored form. I need to create factors. So again, I'm looking for factors that'll give me negative 26, but when I add them together, it gives me 11d. So again, I'm going to look at what are my factors of 26. I know 1 times 26, and I know that 2 goes into 26, and 2 times 13. Okay, and that's about it. There's no other numbers. 3 doesn't go in, 4, 5, 6, so I've got 2 of them. So now I've got to get to 11. Well, 1 and 26 does not get me to 11. 2 and 13, when I add those, I get 15. But look, when I subtract them, I get 11. So 13 minus 2 is 11, which is what I want. However, I've got negative 26. So I need to make one of these factors negative. Which one is it? It's the 2. How do I know it's the 2? Because I need positive 11. So positive 11, when I take 13 and I take 2 away, I get positive 11. So again, I don't need to draw a box because I don't have a number in front of the d squared other than 1. So going to go ahead and write D and D. And then I'm going to take these two numbers as my factors. So I've got D minus 2 and D plus 13. So now I know that that's equal to 0. I'm still not done. I need to continue to solve for D. So I'm going to set each of my factors equal to 0. And I'm going to go D plus 13 is equal to 0. Therefore, I'm going to continue to solve. I'm going to add 2 to both sides. Therefore, D is equal to 2. And D is equal to negative 13. So those are my solutions. Okay, so again, that's the second page of the practice test. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop this video at this point, and I'm going to create a second video that goes over the next two problems that are the word problems on your practice test.